Hello everyone, welcome to Apti Plus Academy for Civil Services. It's a video on daily news and editorial analysis, which I'll be covering from The Hindu and Indian Express. The important news and editorial that would be relevant for the preparation of civil services examination will be discussed in this session. Let's get started with the news topic list. Today is 24th of April. The first important news: how can a juvenile be treated as an adult in the court? This is from the text and context page of The Hindu. Second, amid the global volatility, Saturn declined to set the export target. We have seen that during the pandemic, the performance of the sector was not great. Amid that concern, the government has not come up with a clear-cut policies and even setting the targets. Third, startup facing liquidity crunch. Second last, network of sensors to monitor the groundwater quality. And the last is an editorial safeguarding the constitution. Apart from the news and editorial discussion, at the end of this video, there will be MCQ based questions. These questions will be based on current affairs that will help you for the upcoming prelims examination. So without any further delay, let's get started. And if you're new to our channel, do not forget to subscribe Apti Plus Academy for Civil Services on YouTube. If you like this video, if you find this video informative and helpful till end, do give us a thumb up. And if you're looking for a prelims marathon, definitely this is something where you'll be getting 7 All India Open mock test. And the best part of the test is that you'll get the simulation of the test as per the UPSC level. And it also carries both general studies paper 1 and paper 2. There are exciting offers for the top 3 rankers, and cash prizes will also be there up to 50k on final selection. It has already been started. Do check it out. You can register yourself. I have provided a link in the video description section from where you can be redirected and register yourself. This will help you to excel your preparation 7 times when it comes to the CSE prelims examination. So do not forget to register yourself with the link provided in the description. Now, starting with the first news, that is, how can a juvenile be tried as an adult in the court? This is from the text and context page of The Hindu. Something important for general studies paper 2, that is the welfare schemes for the vulnerable section of the population by the center and the state government. So this news is regarding the recent recommendations which was given by the National Commissions for the Protection of Children. It has recently issued a guideline जहाँ पे उन्होंने recommend किया that they need to have a preliminary assessment by the Juvenile Justice Board under section 15 of the Juvenile to consider whether a juvenile who is above 16 should be treated as adult in case of the heinous crime. So this was a recommendation, the changes that was brought in by the Juvenile Justice Act 2015. Now the preliminary assessment is to determine whether a juvenile can be tried as an adult, and the rest of the proceedings in the court of the law will be treated him as an adult. So replacing the Juvenile Justice Act of 2000, this act, that is the new one 2015, for the first time provide that trying the juvenile above the age group, like above 15, and the age group between 16 to 18, because after 18 he would be ultimately treated as an adult. So after 15, before 15, he will be definitely in adolescence. So there's a critical time that is between 16 to 18. So this is a consideration whether in this age group for a heinous crime, he should be treated as an adult or not. Now, how does a child get tried as an adult? So the act categorizes the offense committed by a child into 3 kind of category. First is called petty offenses, the other is called serious offenses, and the third category is called heinous offenses. So the Juvenile Justice Act, that is the JJ Act, has categorically noted that in the heinous crime, the age group between 16 to 18 should be treated as an adult. Now, what is section 15 of the Juvenile Justice Act? So under the section under the Juvenile Justice Act, this particular section of 15 provide that in case of heinous offenses that has been alleged or committed by a child who has completed his age of 16, the board shall conduct a preliminary assessment. So this is something the Juvenile Justice Board will have to look into the consideration, understanding and treating the part of his mental and physical capacity to commit offense. After a detailed part of the analysis, a conclusion can be drawn whether he should be, the entire proceeding against him can be treated as an adult, right? So under the consequences of the offense and the circumstances, he is allegedly committed to the offense. Now there's other section, that is section 18 and subsection 3 of the Juvenile Justice Act. It further suggests that if a board of the preliminary assessment is under section 15 passes an order for a trial for a child as an adult, the board may order the transfer of the case to the children court having jurisdiction to try some offences. So there's another level of filter that is mandatory before they actually pass it. Now the sole objective of this is to have a preliminary assessment to determine whether a child with the age group of 16 to 18 should be tried as an adult in the case of heinous crime. See, the law is made in such a way where it is providing the options to both, one to the basically the culprit or the convict, and other to the innocent, even for the people against whom the victim, you can call it innocent or you can call it victim. So the culprit or the victim both has a chance before the law to present themselves. So these all sections are made to balance out why and how the child can be treated as an adult and in what conditions. Now responsibility of board बताई गई है, that how the board will be looking into the part of its responsibility. So the Juvenile Justice Board, which is responsible for the preliminary assessment, will be providing the part of the details of the family members of the child, consult them, and even provide a copy of an order if things happen that he's been proceeded as an adult. And if board does not have, and even one part is mandatory here, that there should be a practicing professional of child psychologist, right, who have studied child psychologist or a child psychiatry must be there in the board member, among all the board members that is there. Suppose there's a 4 board member, so among them one should be the child psychologist, right? This is the mandatory one. And the child should be provided with legal aid by the District Legal Service Authority. I think you must be aware of DLSA. UPSC has already asked the question in prelims examination about the District Legal Service Authority or State Legal Service Authority. तो उनके थ्रू उन बच्चों को फ्री में लीगल एड प्रोवाइड करने की भी जिम्मेवारी दी गई है. Now, during the preliminary assessment, the board and the experts shall analyze the part of the consideration for the social investigation report, जिसे SIR भी कहते हैं, जो कि एक child welfare officers will be responsible in making it, or the social officer or the social background report will be taken into the considerations, and that will be shared with the child and the child family. Now, what next with the recommendations and the changes that has been brought in by the National Commission for the Protection of Child Right, that is under the statutory obligations of Section 109 of the Juvenile Justice Act 2015 to monitor the proper implementation of the provision of the Act. Now, guideline के through ये भी बताई गई है that they have been moved to remove the part of ambiguity and to provide the clarity on the part of the following conducting the preliminary test. So there are certain sections like section 15 and section 18 subsection 3 and 2 that will call for the part of the complete investigation, leaving no stone unturned. Now, however, the major issues remain implementation and the adoptions of the part of the principle in the system, particularly to be followed by the Juvenile Justice Board, the Children Court, and even the principle have to be made in a part of the Act that have not been due prominence by the board, by the child court. So everything will be taken into consideration. Once a child is treated as adult, there's another procedure that has to be followed, and even a proper intimations to its family and a child is a mandatory one. And if he is convicted and if he is treated as an adult, there's a services which has to be there from the State Legal Services Authority, or you can say DLSA. So these are the mandatory. Now, moving to the other news, amid the global volatility, the center declined to set the export target. Something important for Gender Studies paper 2 under the Gender Studies, that is the government policies and intervention for the development of various sectors and issues arising from a design and implementations. So as we know that during the COVID-19, we have seen the economy to be volatile and even the weaken in the part of the global economy, and the recent part of the Russia and Ukraine crisis has even acted as a catalyst in the part of the global downturn. So considering the volatility and weakness in the global economy, the union government has pressed a pause on setting on the export target for the current financial year, that is for 2023 and 24. And this volatility has been raised by Russia-Ukraine war, which I have already told you, and the high inflations impacting the discretionary spendings. Now, central government decide kiya hai that it will evaluate the part of the situation on the ground and then will come up with a pragmatic view that what could be the export target for the financial year. Now, what next for the government? Definitely the Ministry of Commerce, that is a concerned ministry when it comes to trade and commerce. In the next 5 months, will be taking the delegations from the export sectors, or जो दूसरे countries के members हैं, they will be also invited to understand the situation at the ground and then set out the export target for India. Now, India will be original part of the organizing the buyer and seller meet, either the exhibitions to push the export, countries export. So this is something which India is looking forward to improve the part of the trade balance by promoting the export of India to the other emerging countries and other valuable chain where India has been the hotspot and वैसे countries पे जहाँ पे India के products की ज़्यादा demand है. Now, merchandise and service exports की अगर बात करें, the financial year, despite the adverse conditions, India has locked a record of merchandise and service export to 770 billions. And in the previous 2 years, the export were tune of 676 billion and 500 billion respectively. The numbers are not important, but you have to just understand the trend of the performance, right? The free trade agreement, that is FTA, that India has recently signed with the United Arab Emirates and even with the Australia, that have immensely helped the exporters in forthcoming to increase the export volume of the country. Now, moving to the other news, startup facing liquidity crunch, something important for Gender Studies paper 2, that is the government policies and intervention for development of various sector and issues rising from a design and implementation. And this particular news is also important for your Gender Studies paper 3 related news, where Indian economy and other issues related to it is mentioned. Now, if you see the part of the liquidity crunch, it has actually hit not only India but the Asian startup ecosystem. और lenders की अगर बात करें, they are looking to a separate liquidity window by the Reserve Bank of India to get fund on the lending on startup, right? So this is a kind of a new instrument that will be providing the financial assistance to the startup. So a dedicated window will help in mobilizing the much needed capital and the startup that is experiencing a liquidity squeeze since the last year, right? Now, lenders may soon approach the regulators, that is the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, with request for the liquidity window. You can see the trend that is going by the funding raised by the Indian startups. Now, COVID-19 has definitely a repercussion on the lending part. So during the COVID-19 pandemic since 2020, RBI has come up with a special window against the targeted long-term repos operation, जिसे TLTROs भी कहते हैं, and RBI ने उसके बाद TLTROs 2.0 भी start किया, that has injected liquidity into the stress sector such as agriculture, agri-infrastructure, micro, small and medium enterprises, MFI, जितने भी micro financial institutions that are MFIs, NBFC, non-banking financial companies, and the healthcare sector. So these were the areas where TLTROs were mostly where the liquidity was injected. Now, the part of the bank are looking to the similar arrangement with the help to meet the liquidity to the startup. उसके अलावे इन सारे सेक्टर्स को हेल्प करने के बाद अब जो पेंडिंग है, खास करके जो लेंडिंग्स थी गवर्नमेंट की, and even the part of providing the liquidity and providing the stimulus, the government is looking forward to push the startup with the liquidity. by injecting more and more liquidity into the market. Now, consequences of liquidity crunch. Definitely, Indian startup has relied majorly on the part of the private equity and venture capital. That is the only and the safest options for any startup, right? Now, they have been facing the funding slowdown because of the 1 year amid the certain macroeconomic conditions. उसमें बहुत सारे कारण है, रशिया यूक्रेन की वॉर है, यूएस की जो policies है, फेड की policies, that is also one, right? Concerning the profitability of the stepping volumes. Now, funding squeeze has resulted in many startup resorting to the massive layoffs. बहुत सारे कंपनीज ने अपने जो एम्प्लॉयज हैं उनके ले ऑफ भी स्टार्ट किए, when the startups are not able to sustain themselves in such conditions. Now, Indian startup has raised up 2 billion in the first quarter of 2023 and 75% lower than the same period. Now, with the skews in the capital, the startup are now looking for a bank to meet their funding needs. Now, bank, even the RBI can only help them out. Usually, the banks are conservative and lending to the startup can give up certainly a round of their growing prospects. So, these are the things that RBI and other banks that is operating in India will definitely take into considerations. And apart from the bank measure, what the government is doing, what are the government measures? So recently the finance minister in a review meeting has said with public sector bank, and she has asked that the lenders to focus more on startup sector, which provide ample opportunity. And even India is becoming the part of the hotspot in terms of the startup across the globe. And she has also asked the Indian bank associations to come up with an action plan जहाँ पे कंसल्टेशन की जा सके बैंकिंग सेक्टर के साथ to help the startup culture. Now, the Indian Banking Association has nominated 12 public sector banks as a nodal bank for the select cities. And these landing banks will conduct an outreach drive to the cities where the private and the foreign bank will participate in understanding the major concern of the startup and even the expectations from the bank, how the bank can help them at the resort. And in 2016, the government has set up the fund for startup, that is called FFS, with the corpus of 10,000 crore rupees. So if you're writing in mains paper specifically, you can highlight all these important points. Now, moving to the other news, that is the network of sensors to monitor the groundwater qualities. Something important for General Studies paper 3, that is the conservation, environmental pollutions, degradations, and EIA. So the Jal Shakti Ministry is working on its ambitious plan to deploy a vast network of the groundwater sensors that will continuously give the information about the ground level and even the degree of contamination that is there at the Tuklak level, right? So तालुक level पे और जो village level है, जो blocks level है, उन पे information दी जाएगी, and this will be giving information one for the ground level which is there and even for the degree of contaminations, right? So you can see, you can write it in a short form, that is the ground level plus the second will be the degree of contamination, right? So this is how the things will be taken into consideration, and this is something that was long demanded by the expert, although we have started now, but it should have started more. Now currently such information is only measured through the handful of times in a year. ऐसा नहीं है कि हर बार मेजर की जाती थी, साल में कुछ बार मेजर होती थी, and that information was shared with the central ground board. Now क्या significance है इस तरह के decision की? Under the new initiative, around 16,000 to 17,000 digital water level recorder will be connected to a piezometer in the well. So this is how the piezometer actually look like, right? And that measures the groundwater level. Record will be transit into the information digitally. So now the part will be not manual but the digital one. Establishing a network will continuously measure the groundwater quality, feeding into the centralized network such as National Water Information Center. And this will make available to monitor, that would make groundwater visible in the case of air quality, meteorological variable, air pressures, moistures and the precipitation. So this will be taken into consideration. What are the things? The first is air pressure, one. Second is moisture, and third is the precipitation. So these are the three things that will be taken into the variable of the part of the air quality for the meteorological variables, right? Now, national aquifer mapping programs की अगर बात करें, the central ground board that is there, it's a nodal body which is looking into the part of the water board. It's charged with the national aquifers and this will be into the part of the mapping, right? और मार्च में ही mapping start की है जहाँ पे national aquifer की जो resolutions है that is 1:550,000 under the second phase of the program, and it is expected to improve the resolutions by 5 times. The average stage of the groundwater extractions in the country as a whole is out to be 60.08%. This is again a factual and important information. Now, anything above 70% is considered to be critical, and there are regions in Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, Rajasthan with the groundwater block with over 100% of extractions. Now, moving to the other news, that is safeguarding the constitution. This is the editorial of the day, something relevant for general studies paper 2, that is the functions and responsibility of union and states and issues and challenges pertaining to the federal structure of our country. A brilliant editorial written by Upendra Bakshi, who is a part and the writer of the professor of law at University and Warwick, and even he had a vice chancellor for University of South Gujarat and Delhi. So what are the issues and focus area of editorial? So the editorial focuses upon the 50-year of Kesavananda Bharati judgment, better known as KB judgment or the judgment for the basic structure of the constitution. We'll see into the background of this. Most of the aspirants who are listening to this lecture are aware. I'm expecting that most of you must be aware about the Kesavananda Bharati judgment because you have read it from the basic book, either from Lakshmikant or any other book. We'll see the background, judiciary versus the government, the basic structure doctrine, and the judicial independence. Now, this year, 2023, mark as the golden jubilee of the Kesavananda Bharati. By golden jubilee, I mean 50 years. And you can expect a question in mains examination and even in the prelims examination. A direct question is expected. All the examination that will be conducted by the UPSC. Now, Kesavananda Bharati was a landmark decision by the Supreme Court that has categorically outlined the basic structure doctrine of the Indian Constitution. There was basically the part of the judges that were there that have come up with the ruling, and this has set the precedent for the basic structure of the Constitution, right, or the basic structure doctrine. Now, in the case, it is also known as the fundamental right case, the basic structure case. The apex court in 7:6 decision has asserted that need to strike down the amendment by the constitution in the violation of the fundamental right of the constitution. अगर किसी भी तरह से जो हमारी fundamental rights हैं उसमें changes की जाएगी वो mandatorily होगी. There's other background that I'll tell you in the later part of the video, but that should ensure that these fundamental right and the amendment to this fundamental right is not harming the basic doctrine or the basic structure of the part of the constitution, right? So this was the main part of the judgment that come up with the Kesavananda Bharati. Now, judiciary versus government की बात की गई है. The ruling was a result of the petition that was filed by the Kesavananda Bharati. He was the head of a Hindu monastery in Kerala, Kasaragod district, and he has challenged the state government land reform that would result into the institutional of losing it holding. That was first, the case was filed over the court, and the Kesavananda Bharati ruling was culminations of the power struggle between the parliament and the Supreme Court in the earlier cases, right? Now, in 1967, the Supreme Court has ruled in the Golaknath versus State of Punjab that the parliament could not amend the fundamental right laid down in the constitution. उसके बाद और भी काफी judgments हैं. I'm not getting into the background of that. I'm leaving over you to study that. But these are the important ones, right? Now, Golaknath verdict को perceived ऐसा किया गया that this was a political decision, right? Now, in 8, अगर बात करें Article 368 की, that provide and deals with the amendment to the constitution, right? And the Kesavananda Bharati emerged as an opportunity where wise exercise of co-constituent power that was submitted by the court, where the court has categorically said that the basic doctrine of the constitution cannot be amended. You can amend the fundamental right, but the basic doctrine cannot be amended. Now, once we are talking about the basic structure doctrine, you need to understand what are that. So among them, the first include the basic feature of the principle include the supremacy of the constitution, a republican and the democratic form of the government, secular character of the constitution, parliamentary democracy, fundamental right, and judicial review. In the latest example where Supreme Court has said that this decision of the central government is violating the basic structure doctrine, what NJAC, National Judicial Appointment Commissions में सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कैटेगोरिकली 101 कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट एक्ट को कहा था कि ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन जो अमेंडमेंट लेकर आई है ये वायलेशन है बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर डॉक्ट्रिन की, राइट. सो these are the latest one which you can quote in the exam also. Now, judicial independence is something which is very important when we are talking about country like India, and even when the democracy at larger extent is something that has to prevail, but judicial independence is also something which has to go parallelly. So judicial independence is important in the essence of the rule of law, which imbibes both the decision autonomy and the institutional autonomy, right? And rule of law means that the parameters of the decision making, the discretion, are always that is circumvented by the constitutions and demand with respect to the constitutional convention. So everything has to be passed within the jurisdiction of the law, and there's a ambit that if something is not under the spirit of the constitution, there is a part of judicial scrutiny that can go, and judicial activism is another term that is there, but judicial scrutiny, the part of the judicial review can say the judicial review will also prevail. Any breakdown of the constitutional togetherness mark the structural crisis and legality and the legitimacy of it. So Supreme Court ने categorically ये कहा था that the right to judicial review is a constitutional amendment by enumerating the basic structure doctrine. तो इसके बाद judicial review की भी एक तरह से आप समझ सकते हैं that was the main base of the judicial review which has come up with this judgment also. And the doctrine of basic structure helped to prevent the legislative excess that was evident in the emergence era. So this was a precedent landmark judgment that was given by the Honorable Supreme Court, and which has set the precedent that yes, fundamental right can be amended, but not on the lines where the basic structure doctrine are compromised. So this was all about the part of the discussion for this editorial. Moving ahead with the MCQ questions of the day. Before I proceed, just to tell you the answers of yesterday questions. For first question, the correct option was C. For second question also, the correct option was C. Today's MCQ for practice, CBI के बारे में आपको बताना है. It's a statutory body established under the Special Police Establishment Act. It's a nodal agency which coordinates with the investigation in the part of the Interpol and the countries, and CBI can take suo motu investigations of any office under the Union territory. So do check out for the correct options. Now the second question is regarding the sugar industry in India. It is the largest producer of export in the world, and the government has been encouraging the sugar mill to divert the ethanol blendings. And what are the target for ethanol blending? You have to see, and what are the target that we have actually achieved. Do check it out. There can be a direct question from this topic. So this was all about for the daily news and editorial analysis discussion, followed by the MCQ questions. If you have any other concern, you can reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to assist you. For time being, I'm signing off. Thank you so much for watching this video.